Hey there, people. Welcome to a brand new episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. If this is your first time tuning into the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that you come back for future episodes. If you are a returning viewer or listener to the podcast, I welcome you back and I hope that you continue to return and spread a good word about this content. So before we get to our guest for today, I want to share a couple of quick announcements. First and foremost, we got a lot of new designs popping at the Identity Talk Apparel Shop. New designs for our librarians, our STEAM educators, and all education professionals in the spectrum. So we're just bringing out these new designs. So if you want to check those out, make sure you go to the Teesprings store at teesprings.com/stores/the Identity Talk Apparel Shop to check us out. And then for our teachers who are looking for some professional development credits to add to their license, we have our virtual Shape of the Teacher Identity 101 program now on Teachable, which provides you with some content focused on culturally responsive and anti-racist practices, teacher identity, educator zone of genius, strategies focused on classroom management, family and student engagement, among many other concepts. So if you are someone that's wanting to grow their craft and to build upon their practice, book a call with us today at kindly.com/identity talk 4 educators. And let's see if we're a good fit for each other. All right. Now let's get to the main event. Today's guest is an individual who I've been admiring from afar via IG. She is a social justice advocate, ELA teacher, teacher coach. There's just so many things I could say about this woman. We just had to bring her on so she could speak for herself. But just know that whenever we bring people onto this podcast, these are people who are doing the real work. And she is someone who fits that mold. And I'm just honored to finally have her come on the podcast to just share her story and the great work she's doing out in the Bay Area. So without further ado, I want to bring on Miss Vennieta Grant to the podcast to share her story. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I can't complain.
Yeah. So how are things going out in the Bay?
Oh, I'm actually in SoCal, so I'm in the LA area.
LA. All right.
Cali, still Cali, just SoCal.
Close. All right.
Close.
I've never been to Cali ever. Never been. I need to get there one day.
You need to come. Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, we have family friends, my wife and I, in San Diego.
Okay.
And my brother had a few friends who went to Pepperdine. So I'm not sure how close that is to where you are.
Really close. So
Okay.
San Diego's like 2 hours and Pepperdine is not far at all. Yeah. So definitely come on down.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's get started. We have a lot to talk about. So, first question that I naturally ask my guest is to tell us a little bit about yourself and what ultimately brought you into the field of education.
Ooh. This is my 19th year, so I've been, in education for a long time. I don't know really, it wasn't my goal necessarily to be a teacher. I just knew that I wanted to work with children in some capacity. I used to work for the city of Long Beach and do special programming, and which was great to create events and different experiences. That was my goal. But then I started thinking I wanted to be in a place where I can make the largest impact. And I knew that I knew the age group that I wanted to work with. I knew I wanted to work with middle school students or high school. I wasn't really sure about that part. And I just thought that I can make the biggest impact through education. And I remember being an undergrad at Cal State Dominguez Hills. I had a professor that said to me that ghettos were socially constructed. And that stuck with me. And I was like, what is she talking about? And I remember it always stuck with me. The idea, I'm a sociology major and I'm a psychology major. I have a double, and my emphasis was community, minority and ethnic relations and community. And when I started to look at the world around me, I thought education is this institution in which it is absolutely constructed, that there's social confines and systemic racism that is built into the fabric of our education system. And so becoming a teacher was my best way of giving students and future generations, and even my own purpose in life work, is in building critical thinking skills and giving students the ability to see the world around them, the power to make decisions for themselves. And I want them to be conscious about the realities of the situations that they're in, the beauty of the situations that they're in as well, and to make those conscious choices as they move forward. Um, Again, fully aware of the system. And so, as an English teacher, I get to have this unique ability to bring in literature and real world application into my classroom every day. And so that is, I guess, I don't know how I got here, but that is what has motivated me and kept me going for the last 19 years.
Wait, 19 years? Wow.
I know I'm hitting the 20-year mark, which is exciting too. I remember when I was like maybe my third year of teaching, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to keep loving this job like this. Like, I love it every day. And people were like, Dad, you're not going to love it. You just wait. You just wait. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It can't stay like this. So I ran back to school and got my master's in educational leadership. And I went and grabbed my my admin credential because I was like, there's no way I'm going to keep loving this job. It's going to wear off. And I got my admin credential, loved it, loved the program, loved the knowledge that I learned, definitely in school systems. But I loved teaching at year 19 more than I loved it in year 3 when I thought I couldn't love it anymore. And so I think it's one job that allows me to keep growing. And luckily, I've had the tremendous opportunities to be able to pick and choose my passion projects. If I don't want to do something, I don't do it. And that also comes with time. But I can definitely say I don't want to do that. I want to do that. I love to develop curriculum. And so, that's what's kept me going for 19. I didn't think my 19th year would be like this, definitely. But even in distance learning, I think that there is an incredible learning curve. And I believe that it has even opened up more opportunities for me to be able to, refine my craft and make connections and push myself, in a way where I'm a techie. I love everything, technology. And I knew that before, but now you have to step your game up even more. And so just the
Oh,
tools
for sure.
that, oh my goodness, that we picked up, even through social media, even, in connection and networking. I think that we won't go back to the school year, whenever we do return, we'll return with a different lens, a different, again, the students are in control right now, where if you tell them to turn that camera on, they say no, which I'm okay with. If you tell them to turn in work, they say no. And I can't raise my left eyebrow and give them that look like you're going to turn that work in. And so I'm going to have to find different ways to communicate with students. And, the falling off and having to recreate a lesson on the drop of a dime, it, in distance learning is constantly like my lesson plans, they'll bomb and I'll say, okay, let me redo this. And it's just becoming so natural to me now. It's a good way to learn from other people. And definitely we will not be returning back, or I won't be returning back the same teacher. There's so much that I've learned about myself and about this practice and about my kids and about the situations that they're experiencing. And so I think it will forever changed.
All right. Well, I have a couple of questions before I get to this main question.
Okay.
Or actually, a couple of comments, actually. Number one, you look like you're about to go into your third year of teaching overall. You say 19.
Yeah.
I had to just say that. And then secondly, the fact that you're approaching year 20 and you still have this vibrant spirit about you going into 20 years of teaching, I think it's just a testament to the love that you have for this work. But I do want to talk about what you said regarding teachers not being the same after this pandemic. Now, I've been observing from the outside because I'm not in the classroom right now, and this is what I would assume. I would assume that the teachers who have always been the ones that have, for instance, created their own scope of sequence, that have always been supplementers, always looking for best practices, not being confined to the textbook or the scope of sequence to get them through a whole school year. I feel like they're the ones who are having more success in this space compared to those that felt married to those documents. Would you say that's a safe assumption?
I'm gonna steal your term that I learned from you this week, the LeBrons. Okay, go on and make a shirt. But you need to go ahead and make that design. Go ahead and get it done. But when I saw that, I was cracking up. That had to be like the best definition. Like I think you had a Twitter thread about it, about the
Yep.
LeBrons, and I was like, I mean, I have, and this is a perfect opportunity to give you praise for that. And I have never had someone like just define that role that you're placed in. And when all of a sudden the LeBrons say, hey, wait a minute, we need to talk about the structure here, then it's like it's a problem. And I think I've worn that jersey before, keeping keeping a basketball metaphor, but definitely you'll see it. But yes, those LeBron teachers, I think the ones that are constantly looking at themselves as learners, we can never cap out. We have to continue to refine, repractice, relearn. It's so much. And so I guess if you came into the profession with that mindset that you're constantly having to create, if you were comfortable creating curriculum, comfortable with challenging strategy, trying new strategies, and if you were open to that, I think this will be just another extension of it. If you're very married to the scope and sequence, you're going to find out that it's probably not going to work the same way, that your pacing is going to be slowed down. Again, I think I posed that question in my last staff meeting is, do we keep moving or do we stop? Because only 5 kids are turning in work per period. So is this a reteachable moment or are kids just totally shut down? So if you're just looking at the scope and sequence and pushing forward and, kids are dealing with so many things at this time and you can't have the empathy to see that and find out different ways to try to reach them, and still keep high expectations. The juggling act is literally impossible at times, especially when you're trying to find a digital substitution for something that you're continuously doing. So I think that a lot of this job is creative, and it is constantly trying to find a different way to, I hate to use the word pivot because it's been used so much this year, but what is your teacher tool belt? And the teacher tool belt has to extend so far beyond what is on, a pacing plan or a scope and sequence matrix that you didn't create yourself. And so, I'm very guilty of that. I'll look at it, I'll say, okay, I think I got it, and then I'm going to teach the way I need to teach. And so, for people that are more married to that, I think this is a very, very hard transition, because if you're going 1, 2, 3, from the matrix that wasn't redeveloped before distance learning, and not taken to the abundance of factors that are occurring all around, from students dealing with extreme grief to depression to lack of resources, you name it. There's so many different things that are happening at one time that we have that are beyond our scope of control and influence. Right. So if you're going 1, 2, 3, you're going to be burned out by day 2, because you're going to find that the things you used to do, like I said, just proximity, that's a teacher, teacher 101 is, proximity. If a student's off task, proximity. And there's no proximity when you don't even know who the kid is. There are students that I haven't even heard their voices or seen their faces this whole school year, and it's February. So it does force you to change, and people that are resistant to that, I think, is going to be, if I don't know what they're doing, because it's very difficult. And we don't have the systems also in place. I know in a lot of school systems like mine, or schools, that people are not speaking about what they're having difficulty in. They're saying they're having trouble, but no one's really um, reaching out for help on those different things. And a lot of the reasons is because people are just overwhelmed. Where do you start? You know?
But is it also possible that they're feeling the pressures of the teacher evaluation process, because there are teachers who are still getting evaluated
Yes.
during the pandemic, even with the large learning curve that they're experiencing? They're still being held to those same expectations as they were pre-COVID. So I do believe that it has to do with the fact that some of the evaluators aren't giving enough grace to teachers to give them that time to assimilate and to adjust. And I know it's been close to a year since we've been in this pandemic and doing virtual learning, but it's still difficult for a lot of teachers, even some of the best teachers out there. So I'm just wondering if that may have something to do with the reluctance to admit that they're having some issues and being expressive of that.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. In my particular situation, in my school and in my district, we aren't having the evaluations at the same rate. I don't think we've been evaluated this whole year. And they have said, do you need help and what do you need help in? I just feel like in our particular school situation, it's a lot of times people are so overwhelmed with where do you even start? And so I don't think there's enough professional development either, so that if you did voice you had a concern, um, who who's going to remedy that? So I think beyond making sure we have the hardware, or the to make distance learning work, I don't know if there necessarily is the scaffolding of professional development to allow teachers that are trying, even in the best intention, trying to make the transition between, maybe, following the book, 1, 2, 3, to go on a completely digital, in a different, realm, a different way of delivering instruction. I don't think those things have been provided for teachers. And so I think another part of that is, you know, if I say that I need help, I've already recognized that it's going to fall on deaf ears. So I think that might be another issue for those folks that are not getting evaluated, but just have learned the reality of the situation of distance learning and the lack of professional development opportunities for teachers. And I mean real scaffolded, differentiated um, opportunities for learning and growth.
Now, one thing that I've come to realize about teaching, just even in my years, is it's an art form.
Mhm.
Teaching is an art form, but when we go through our teacher education programs, that's not how it's laid out for us. It's laid out as if it's algorithmic. And I gotta use my math language because I'm a math teacher, so I'm gonna throw the math language out there. It just seems very algorithmic or formulaic, where okay, you have to deliver instruction this way. You have to manage students this way without taking into consideration the context you're in culturally, socioeconomically. And I think that's what causes a lot of teachers, new teachers, to come in with this lack of independence and ability to embrace autonomy in their development as teachers, if that makes sense. So I want to know from you, because I know you do some teacher coaching as well at Cal State. What do you believe are some of the current gaps that exist in teacher education in general?
Okay, you did bust the mathematic, terminology, but I hung in there. But
All right.
again, beautifully executed. Um, that is the gap. It is that, new teachers that are coming into the program. And just for background information, I do work for Cal State University Dominguez Hills. I work in CSI3, which is the Institute for Innovation and Improvement in teaching. And we have many different programs. And at Cal State University Dominguez Hills, teachers have different programs to best suit um, their transition into teaching. But I don't think necessarily all teachers know exactly from the beginning what they're going to need. And I think that that is just it. I would love for programs to focus on that part of creativity and flexibility and vulnerability in developing curriculum and lesson plans. And I think that that's what happens. They know how to do a 7-step lesson plan. They'll grab it off a TPT or somewhere else. They'll fill in every box and they're ready to go. And I think that, they may get a class here on SEL or class here on, how to engage students. So I always see like new teachers, that go through the program tend to sometimes they'll focus on the hook. Like, okay, I'm really hooking this student with this, question or this little video or whatever else it is. And it's like, okay, but what happens if that doesn't work? What do you do? And it's teaching them the flexibility in developing lessons that, yeah, create your plan, but what are you going to do if? What are some different strategies? And then the why. Why are you doing this? And how does it meet the need of the potential students in your classroom? And it's going to go beyond subcategories of students. It could just be students that have a bad day because of this, or that are feeling that they are misunderstood because of something that happened yesterday. And understanding the communities that in which we're teaching, what are the needs, what are different ways to reach the students. And I think that when we evaluate teachers, it's how well are you able to get through that lesson plan versus can you explain the parts and can you truly reflect. And if you're evaluating and someone deviates from that because they're able to read the student, or they're able to make those changes because they notice that there's a teachable moment, or they notice that it wasn't, their execution was great, but guess what? The students didn't respond the same way when they implemented that strategy or whatever's on that written lesson plan. And so I think teaching teachers to have a plan, but be able to understand the needs of their students and be able to respond should not be a ding because you didn't get to the end of that lesson for that day. As long as you can explain why you made changes, and maybe that one single day lesson plan should be a multi-day lesson plan because you were able to gauge and sometimes on the spot differentiate and scaffold as needed for where your students are on that particular day, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I believe that part of the issue is the evaluators who do the evaluating. Because you have principals and you have school leaders who don't have that instructional background. If we're going to keep it 100, some of them have never stepped foot in the K-12 classroom, have never had that experience. And not only have they not had that experience, let's say they've had that experience, were they competent in that role, right?
Right.
Did they have the receipts while being in that role? And I think that plays a role in how they interpret whatever rubric they have for evaluating, because we know that the rubric and the different indicators that we have are subjective. And depending on who's evaluating you, that's what's going to determine how you're being scored or assessed.
Right.
But yeah.
No, I totally agree. And one of the programs that I work at, because at DH we have several different programs. One of them is a support that, and I'll talk about that a little bit, a TSI, which we support. And again, that looks very different. One thing that I like about the program, and this is maybe my 6th year working with the team, is when I was hired in, one question that that when I got, acted for the position, was they said, well, we're looking at the nuances. You're being hired because we want you to teach the nuances of teaching. And I was like, all the things that you do that you don't even consider. It's the nuances, the gray areas. It's the part that isn't in the coursework that teachers will need. We need you to teach that and communicate that to the teachers that you're mentoring. And so we have this unique lab school experience. And I'm not saying that because I worked there. I'm saying that because in the 6 years that I've worked there, there is a reflection process in that we come in and take feedback. and with external auditors, as well as with the feedback from the residents or the candidates. And we have to constantly change. What's not working, the work this year doesn't work next year. And one of those things is that I am the evaluator. And so when I come in to evaluate you, this full circle moment is happening to me. Let me tell you, I have students that I taught in 8th grade are now students at the university.
Wow.
Becoming teachers. And I mean, I will literally choke up. And you'd say, what keeps you going in the energy? There's nothing like that vibe as you walk in there and they're like, yeah, we had a round circle, side note, at the beginning of one of our sessions, I think 2 years ago, and we're doing a round, circle. And I definitely recognize one of my babies. And we were supposed to, why become teachers? And then she turned and she says, I became teacher because of her. And I was like, kind of guilt, but we don't even know about the impact that we have. And you talk about even the energy, that's it, is, even that. But to take on from her teacher, and then she was one of my AVID tutors when she was in college. And then now she is a teacher. Now she teaches at the high school down the street from me, which is amazing. And that's that 19 years kicking in. But to be her coach and mentor, to see her as a teacher was so different. And my approach is very different. Yes, I want to see your lesson plan ahead of time, go through. But during the lab, there are teachers that come into the lab, right? So it's a summer school session. There are teachers that are in the lab. And so those are the pre-service candidates. They're going to go in the classroom in the fall or the next year, depending on where they are in their program. And they're getting their service hours. And there's a group of students in there too. And they're doing summer school, not knowing why there's 7 adults in the classroom. Okay. But they're getting, this is a university coming in for the STEAM program. It's a project-based learning program, blah, blah, blah. And it's beautiful because it's just like I will say in the hospital, in the medical, field where you're becoming a doctor and there's an intern. It's the same process. So I'm coaching. I'll look at your lesson plan. I'll know what you're doing, but I also will ask you, hey, just wondering, why are you doing these 3 things? Oh, and sometimes I'll get a lot of kickback in the beginning. It's like, well, I know this. Okay, we'll see how this goes. And I'll sit back. I'll create a safe word with the people that I'm mentoring. If you feel stuck in the classroom, you want me to jump into a lesson, I can. I study their lessons, and they roll them out. And then at the break, we come in, we talk about it, we discuss, and we make changes. And if they're not ready, do you want me to model it for you right now, the strategy? What do you want me to model? Okay, I'll model it. Do you want to co-teach with me? Or are you ready to go on your own? So it's that real life application that they can. And again, I don't mind that it didn't work out, that lesson worked out. I'll ask you, do you want me to evaluate first, second, or third period? Which one do you want me to evaluate? What are you most comfortable in? You didn't like this one? Okay, I'll evaluate you third period. Do you want me to model it for you second period? And it's that vulnerability that I am not here to play I get you, because those kids need you. It's more important for me to sit back and say, hey, did you notice that, that when you dropped your eye level with Damon, that was really great. I love the way you did that. I mean, the kid, but there was 32 kids behind you throwing paper airplanes. Did you notice that? Because in your lesson plan, that looks really good to say, I dropped to eye level with students and I asked them one-on-one. And then once I had one candidate one year who was like, well, she got it from the textbook. She's telling me like, and this is why I'm doing it. And I had a recorder. And I had to say, hey, look at this. I'm going to show you my view of the classroom. And she started to cry. I said, please don't cry. Don't cry. This is a learning experience. Now, you did great with that child. Now, what are we going to do with the rest of them? So it's that vulnerability in that cycle of, this is my lesson plan. This is my thought process. That's okay. Now let's move into seeing it, reflecting on it, going back, me modeling and showing you, because I have to be the person that can show you what I'm trying to teach you. And, and whatever it is, it might be something so small. And I'm like, it's my style. It might not work for you. You try it your way or try it my way, whatever else. And then by the end of the day, they have a clear expectation of, what the classroom really is. It doesn't always go anywhere. You learn from it and then you move on to the next day. And we do this process for 5 weeks. And so I wish there were more programs like that. I wish I had that when I was a new teacher. And that's 100% what keeps me motivated. I want to be the teacher that I needed when I came in, because it was brutal. It was brutal when I
Oh,
first came in. But that if we had more programs that believe in that process, and again, our candidates will still tell you, we have too much work and all these other things. But that component, I think, of reflection, pre-brief, debrief, working with the teams, debrief, we have a whole cycle that happens every day.
and what you just mentioned right there is the prime reason why it's important to have active practitioners, actual classroom teachers in these positions in academia where they can provide that perspective, where they can catch on those cues in the classroom that maybe that tenured professor is not able to catch on, right?
Exactly.
But but then also with regard to the evaluation process, and I keep harping on this, I honestly believe depending on what school you work in, right? There's this shiny mirrors phenomenon that takes place where all you have to do is have that perfect constructed lesson plan with all your objectives, your Common Core standards, your launch activity, your closing activity, your anticipated questions, all those standard components.
That check
If,
for understanding.
yep, that check for understanding too. We got to check for the schema, right?
Right.
but but if you have all those together, that alone will give you a passing grade for your evaluation. And I think
Absolutely.
that's the problem. We don't have enough conversations around the decisions that are made. And I think it's analogous to, and I'm going to go with my favorite basketball player, Kobe Bryant. So I'm going with the basketball analogy again. Now, with Kobe, he didn't just go out there and play basketball, right? The man studied the game. The man knew about situations. He practiced situations. He practiced things that he would anticipate during the game, right? Thought process. Why did he make this move? Why did he take this shot? Why is this defensive person cutting, into the paint? Now, when we think about teachers, and you mentioned this as you were talking about your teacher program, we have to have those conversations where we have to ask those questions. It's not about the finished product of the lesson plan. It's about the thought process.
That's it.
The thought process is what we need to focus on because guess what? We're not going to get through the lesson plan 9 times out of 10 perfectly.
No.
There's going to be audibles along the way. There are going to be times where you realize, wow, this is way beyond, their development. And we might need to do some scaffolding on the spot because these kids aren't getting it right now. I got to provide some support for them right now. Or I might need to just throw that lesson plan away, do it again. We don't have enough of those conversations because I think teachers get penalized for the way their lesson plan gets constructed as opposed to the
Absolutely.
thought process that they went through to construct the lesson plan and also the decisions that they make during their teaching. Would you agree?
100%. Oftentimes it's the same in the teacher ed program as it is oftentimes in your school site. So that evaluator comes out, they have their evaluation, they have their indicators, they have their rubric. And when they come in, it is how well was every student on task? How well did you get to the end of the lesson? And that's what people get dinged on. And the reality is, if I do come into a classroom with a brand new teacher or even a veteran, and that lesson plan is followed to the T, I'm like, what kid did you pay? Like, what happened? Like, what kids did you set up? Did you do this lesson 2 weeks ago and then redo it? Because that is not how it goes. It's unrealistic in a lot of cases that a brand new teacher will be able to gauge students, gauge that assignment, that lesson plan at 100% is ridiculous to think that that's going to happen. And I'm looking for teachable moments. I'm teaching for. I'm more concerned with the why of why you rolled up that strategy. Is there another way you could do it? Do you modify between periods when you find out that it doesn't work? I often say my first period is my reality check.
Mm.
As teachers, we tend to come into the classroom with adult speak. I love creating a beautiful lesson, but sometimes I'll roll it out to my kids, and guess what? they the level that I'm hitting, they're not there, and I need to create some scaffolds on the spot, and that is my responsibility to meet them where they are. Or guess what? They forgot what they learned yesterday, because the reality is they didn't go home and study it. They didn't do the homework, and those are realities, in especially in the environments that we teach in. And so, for in any practice, I think that I'm more impressed with a teacher that's able to do that check for understanding, but then take that information and figure out different ways to reach those students. Maybe you noticed, you rolled up that perfect, intro activity, and as you do your check for understanding, you realize that half the class didn't get it. That's the part that I want to see, that you're able to differentiate and address those needs, and not just mull over it and go to the next part of that lesson because you want to be done. And so I think that as a practice in any TED program, it needs to be that part is allowing teachers to stumble and give them the tools to be able to pick themselves up. Because again, that perfect lesson plan is probably not realistic for a brand new teacher walking into a classroom. And so when you can, do all the check marks and such, think about our students. How often is that a lesson plan that they've already practiced, or they've told the kids, hey, I'm being evaluated tomorrow, be on your best behavior, smile and nod. And, I've seen all those things play out. And again, I can't blame the teachers. That's the way the system has created it, where your livelihood is at stake. If you don't do this evaluation on the 23rd, I may not be rehired. So we have to be
Yes.
honest. And in our program, for example, we have a contract with LAUSD, and we are and basically go out to and provide teachers that are in high need schools. And so these are the schools that are going to have the highest turnover rate of teachers. And, that is going to impact how students respond to you. There's so many different factors that no matter how much you tell a teacher, the best thing you can do for them is to have them not take those actions of students personally, but to understand how to read those reactions, and to make changes. And that's what the real scaffolding is, and the real differentiation, and building relationships first. If you see their kids are shutting down all across the board, you may have to stop that lesson and build a relationship, have the
Mm.
conversation. And so those are the things that unfortunately need to be done on day 2 of teaching. It's not those building the relationships. You can do the best lesson plan ever. The relationship building portion that we're not discussing needs to be done at the beginning. And so
Yeah.
those are the things that we should be practicing.
And what you're touching on right there is culturally responsive teaching,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we hear about this all the time. We've heard about it for years. And I'm of the mindset that it shouldn't take you a book to understand what it means. When I think about culturally responsive teaching, I believe that it's the greatest form of empathy that you can have as an educator. Just simply taking the time to take inventory of your learners, what they do outside of school, what do they like to do, how do they like to learn, and I know in the beginning of the year, we always talk about building the relationships, giving them these interest surveys to get a sense of what kind of student they are, right? And those things are very important. We need to do those things. But I also realize too that the way that we are trained in our average teacher education program is in a way that is streamlined for you to do things in an algorithmic way. So it's going back to what I said before. So I'm wondering from you, how can we get colleges and universities and even teacher residencies to decolonize their teacher education programs? Because if we're going to be real about this, a lot of the right way of teaching is very much rooted in a dominant culture. If we want to be more specific, is rooted in white supremacist norms,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how do we get our institutions of higher learning to shift from that paradigm and to be more inclusive of culture responsive ways to go about instruction and pedagogy and other aspects of the teacher profession?
Ooh. I think a lot of it is performative. I think a lot of things that we do and check for understanding activities and SEL relationship building tends to be performative, and people don't realize how wise children are, and they also recognize it. And so I think more than it being like a beginning for all universities is that we don't create, and again, that's a part of the process, is we don't create space to build relationships and make that a part of letting students see themselves. And so in the curriculum that we create, in in making more of a holistic approach to the curriculum where students can see themselves and representation of themselves, and making that wherever you choose to work, you need to become aware and conscious and respectful of the communities in which you work in. And that needs to be a part of every TED program. Okay, you're going to work in said neighborhood or whatever else. What are the norms of that neighborhood? What are the issues in the neighborhood? What are the celebrations? What are things that students are most proud of? And those things have to be important beyond one course or beyond a get to know you inventory activity. It's not an activity, it is a mindset. And it is a way that we approach and respect our students. And that has to be a part that is interwoven into the development of teacher education programs. It starts with, a teacher having definitely empathy for their students and also respect for their students and the communities in which they work in. A lot of times, because of the way of the structure and a part of it, ideally decolonizing the whole system would be for teachers to stop coming in as if they're saving the day or they're coming in to rescue the kids. If you often find out, the kids don't feel like they need to be rescued. So coming in there with that deficit mentality into a community, don't think the kids are going to want to receive that. You respect who they are, respect their community, make any type of relationships and parallels in your experiences. And kids need to know every single day that you think the highest of them and what their capabilities and their potential is. And I always tell the kids that, oh yeah, I'm gonna always have the highest expectations for you, the highest. And then in that, I have to find out ways, because in the back of my mind, I always tell the kids, hey, look at the situation. This is going on here. This is going on here. Understand what's happening in your neighborhood. That's important. Um, you need to understand. My students always, let's talk about systemic racism and how it impacts Lynwood. Straight up. I always tell my students, hey, I respect you. I have one rule in my classroom, and it's the law of reciprocity. I respect you. I'm going to always talk to you with respect. It's a reciprocal factor. This is a safe place. That is my whole thing. This is a safe place to learn. It is the highest expectation because I think the highest of you. Now, in that same respect, I will do anything to get you there. And kids need to know that. And I think that in our programs, we have to acknowledge that kids are going to learn differently. And right into what we are just talking about with the fact that in TED programs, it's going to be a flexibility because you have to know the environments in which you work in. And so, again, it would definitely start with just restructuring the system to allow for true differentiation and scaffolding based upon the needs of the students, and always keeping those high expectations. But notice that it's going to be an ebb and a flow. There has to be a give. You're not going to have teachers, teachers need to have their own, need to be able to almost justify like why they teach the way they teach. And I think people really need to start to look at the philosophies of teachers, and do they vibe, and do they, mesh with the communities in which they service. And I think,
And I'm sorry,
no,
because you mentioned something here. I believe before students get to their practicum semester, whenever that is, the student teaching, they should be going to different neighborhoods to get a sense of how they interact in those neighborhoods. So I don't know if that's what happens within the program at Cal State, but I know in certain teacher education programs, they have their teacher candidates go to, let's say, a more affluent neighborhood where you have predominantly, white people there. And then they'll go to a more, urban neighborhood, right, where it's more racially diverse, and you have maybe Black and Latinx folks there and indigenous people. But just giving them an opportunity to just go into these different settings to see the differences in the dynamics, whether it's socioeconomically, whether it's racially, culturally, so that when they do get to their practicum, they already have an idea of where they would like to teach, right? And I think for myself and maybe for you as well, you knew going into your first year of teaching that, all right, listen, I want to teach in the hood.
Yeah.
I love teaching in the hood. Like, I got to be with my people.
That's it.
The day that I don't want to be with my people is the day that I quit teaching, period. I knew that, but not everybody gets to that point. So I guess I want to know your thoughts about having teacher candidates be in different settings before they make that decision of what district they want to go to, what school they want to be in.
Well, at DH, it depends on what program you are. But if you are, in my program, we we have contracts. So we are gonna, focus on South LA, Watts, Compton, Lynwood. Those are gonna be our target areas because they're of the highest need. And
Mhm.
so they do meet with principals, and they can visit the school sites. Is that going to be the actual what it's going to be like to be in the classroom? Probably not 100%, but at least what you're signing up for, and exactly, at least the community. And again, it's up to the candidate at that point to do their own homework. But yeah, there are a lot of other programs that I definitely know, and that the disconnect between what they're teaching and that ideal model of how to teach those particular students and all these different things, this model is just such a stark contrast to who the students that they're going to work with. And I think that's unfair to the teacher, it's unfair to the students, it's unfair to the community. And I think that needs to be something that I agree with you, needs to definitely be a conversation. It needs to be a part of, again, principals, even when you're hiring, who are you hiring, and
Mhm.
how do they fit into the fabric of your particular school? Also, in our programs, it's all we all often think that once the candidate goes into the school and they get hired, that they're going to be taken care of by the school community, and that often doesn't happen. So
Nope.
oftentimes they will leave the program and then leave their cohort, go into a school, and then they don't have the support systems that they need to make sure that's a right fit. And so, um, I guess to go, to close out that issue is definitely, it has to be, you have to know where you're working. You have to be able to know if it's the right fit for you. And if it's not, it's okay. It's okay to quit. It's okay to say this isn't for you, because again, the kids can smell it, they can see it. They know when they're being marginalized. They know when it's pretend. They know everything. And so again, teachers need to be able to be encouraged that if it's not for you, it's not for you.
Totally agree with everything. Totally agree. But before we get to the lightning round, I do want to talk about AVID for a second.
Okay.
Because in full transparency, I know a little bit of what AVID programs are,
Okay.
but I don't think it's something that is, maybe I'm wrong, super popular in a lot of, secondary schools. So I wanted to take this time for you to just share what is an AVID program, number one, and how do you support students in your role as a coordinator in that program?
Okay, definitely. AVID program, I always say it looks, yes, we do have there is a certification program, and there are, to be an AVID school, you have to meet all the certification, indicators. But I always say that it's going to be different at different schools, and definitely whatever the vision of the school is, and definitely the coordinator's vision. So my AVID program will tend to look differently than other people's AVID program. But AVID is a program that again, I've been in for a very long time, and I've seen it kind of change and grow and kind of evolve. And I take from it what I need. And so for me, it's advancement via individual determination. And in Lynwood, it is a very good program to allow students to, for me as a coordinator, to be able to provide for my students that at a very young age, because remember, I'm recruiting 11-year-olds. And so for me, I always say that it's very hard to have 11-year-old apply for our college preparatory program. And
Mhm.
so with the AVID program, we have two different programs that are happening now, but it's basically a student that wants to go to college, that maybe the first generation to go to college in their family. You look at socioeconomic levels, etc. It'll be different, like I said, in different schools. But in mine, a kid that wants that, that says, yeah, I think I want to go to college, and then you provide the resources, and you're looking at opportunities. And so opportunity gaps. So for example, I always say that, a student that sees UCLA for the first time, that's never seen the university, just exposure to being on the campus, those are things that I can provide to the AVID program. So college field trips, mentorships. I have an actual elective class with all of my students. In that elective class, we work on like Wicker and, again, communication skills. I have this opportunity to dig in deep and check transcripts. And again, it is getting a student ready for the college path. And realistically, oftentimes I work in a district of social promotion. And so a lot of students will fail classes and think like, oh, in ninth grade, I'm going to get it all together. But they don't have the math requirement, or they're failing English. And unfortunately, the way the system is set, it
Yep.
does get the way how an eighth grader performs in eighth grade is going to basically look at their trajectory for high school. That ninth grade counselor is going to say, okay, this student is failed 3 classes. I'm trying to get them out of high school, not necessarily on a college preparatory track to take, calculus in whatever grade. And so in AVID, my job is to we have tutors that come in, they're college tutors. A lot of them are my former AVID students, which is wild. And so we have college tutors that come in. The students generate their own questions, and it's basically to help the student in every area that they feel they need. So they say
Right.
a middle criteria for me is any student that says, I want additional support. They have college field trips, they have guest speakers. Um, for us during the pandemic, I don't even know what it looks like now, because our kids have so many different needs. A lot of it's just socio emotional now. So for us, the AVID program allows me to be able to, any kid that deems themselves like, I want to go to college. In middle school, it allows me to give them the exposure to universities, the exposure to looking at what a transcript is and understanding what a GPA is and working towards goals. So we do goal setting, they do GPA analysis, they have their own individual tutors. All the tutors have case studies that they work with the students. They work on communication skills with their teachers. I play the pseudo counselor on deck, so that I'm that person that is the liaison between the parents and the students. And also vertical articulation. It's nice to be able to say I'm handing my students over into a program at the
Right.
next level. So again, there are I understand criticisms, because in some districts it's different and it's flipped, and it's maybe a more affluent district. And then it's like, oh, well, those kids that may not go to college, let's help them. In our district, it's much different. It's any student that says, I want to go to college and I may need this assistance or support, or I want to go on the field trips. So it depends. As the 11-year-old, sometimes it's Magic Mountain.
Oh, and you touched on social promotion, and I know
Yeah,
all about that too well.
don't
Man,
put me on my soapbox.
don't get me started with that. But I have to. I just have to, because this isn't something that we talk enough about on this podcast. So I taught 7th and 8th grade students. So naturally, when students got to 8th grade, they're thinking about what high schools they want to go to. So there's a competitive high school process. They're filling out applications. They're trying to get letters of recommendation. You have all this. You have all these things going on in 8th grade. Here's the thing that bothers me about social promotion, and it kind of it kind of gives me a reason why I grind my gears about grades in general, right? So with social promotion, you have kids who have been retained or have stayed back maybe once or twice, but there's a limit to how many times they can stay back, right?
Well, I think
Because
everybody's going. Yeah,
there's a
forever.
limit. There's a limit, right?
Yeah.
So like you've
They
already stayed back twice. Guess what? Mrs. Sarfo-Mensah, you can't you can't hold me back again. I'm going to the next grade. So guess what? I'm taking these next 10 months off, kick my feet up, do whatever I want to do because I've already stayed back. So you have kids who are gaming the system because they know you can't do nothing about it, which is very problematic. But the other thing with social promotion is the students who end up staying back, they're not students who are struggling academically. They are highly capable of doing the work. The problem is they just can't rock with school as it's currently constructed.
right,
The the structure and the system doesn't speak to them. It has no relevance to them. So then when you mention AVID, I'm thinking about those students who talk about the fact that they know what they want to do for a career. And the stuff that we're teaching them doesn't align with what they want to do. So
right,
I'm thinking about the skills as opposed to them going to college because the reality is some students may not go to college, but guess what? The skills that they learn through AVID are transferable to professions that they're considering,
right,
whether they go into an apprentice program, a trade, or maybe they do an associate's program at a community college. They can at least have those skills in their toolbox to take with them. So I'm wondering, why is it that programs like AVID aren't a more normalized part of our curricula?
Well, probably it probably goes down to money because it does cost to bring the
Yeah,
program in. But I always say that too. That I don't know how many students are avid going to. Remember, I only have them in middle school, but
right.
the reality of it is, it's just like even the organizational piece. Just there's like organizational piece of creating like going to digital, but creating an agenda and for right now, Google calendaring their events and prioritizing time and whatever else. Those are tools that are applicable to every, resume building, analyzing transcripts. They need all those things. And so I think it also goes down to, in order to have the program, you have to have the funding source to be able to hire the tutors to come in. You have to have a 7-to-1 ratio for those tutors. And they have to be made available to the student during school hours. And so those are certain requirements. And then plus, teacher professional development, which is actually really, really good um, for the team or
Hmm.
whatever else. And the goal is to get the whole school um, to be trained in AVID strategies. But again, the AVID strategies, once again, are not anything revolutionary. It's just good teaching practices, bottom line. And then the idea of AVID eventually, as you go through certification, is to become school wide so that the strategies are taught to every student school wide. And there's certain students that have the elective class. But the good teaching practices should be applied to the entire school.
Yeah, and that's what we love about education, right? We
Right.
love to repurpose content and slap a new name on it every couple years. That's education for you.
That's it. That's it.
But now I want to transition now into the lightning round. So we've been doing a lot of education talk, but now I want to get to learn a little bit more about Venita
Ooh,
and
okay.
what she likes to do outside of the classroom. So I do have a few questions, which I did send to you. But before I ask you the questions, you have pets, right?
I do. I have 3 dogs.
Okay, good. So I can ask.
You probably hear my pug snoring.
Okay, so I can definitely ask the question then. Good. All right, but let me ask this first question. What is your favorite self-care activity right now, given all the stress of virtual learning that's you've been experiencing throughout this pandemic? What's your go-to self-care activity?
Really, honestly, I love TV right now. So it's like Netflix I have never, like, this is a beautiful time with TV. Like, there's so many different things that I want to see. So just providing myself time to not have to do anything is like the best self-care activity for me right now. It's just having time where I'm dedicated to doing nothing. Conversations again are so important to me. So just FaceTiming with friends and loved ones is extremely important to me right now. So staying connected is a form of self-care for myself. And I do have a spa day that's coming up on Monday after work. So, or I'm sorry, Tuesday after work. And so I think that's another version of it, of self-care.
Awesome. And I know you're an avid traveler. You love to go around the world. Can you give me 3 countries that are still on your bucket list? Never been to before.
Ooh. I'm there's so many, but I would love to go to Greece. I still want to go to, I want to go everywhere. Brazil. I would love to go to Ghana. I would love to go to Japan. There's way more than 3. And I do want to go back to, I'm Panamanian and been there many times before, but I think I want to push everything aside to go back to Panama.
Nice. So my mother-in-law is Panamanian,
Oh.
but she has the strong Jamaican accent because it goes back to the history, with Panama,
Yes, yes.
the Caribbean culture, right?
My grandfather is Jamaican. Yes.
Yep. And my family is from Ghana. So I'm a first generation immigrant. My mother and father both from Ghana. Even lived there for a few years. So I can tell you it's a beautiful place. You'll love it. You'll love it.
I can't wait.
All right. I see you have a very extensive library behind you. Can you give me one book that every teacher should read?
We want
One
to do
book.
more. We want to do more than survive by Bettina Love. Start there. Everyone
Mm,
should start there.
man,
Everyone.
and I have that in my library as well. So it's definitely an awesome book. A book that I'll need to revisit because just that book where you have to read it over and
Yeah.
over again. You learn something new every time you read it.
Every time. I do the same thing. In fact, I'm going to pull it out again. Um, I think I did pull it out because I wanted just to look at a whole other section. Again, as we have aha moments, and as again, education continues to change, and the social dynamic is changing, and so it's always relevant.
All right. Now I'm going to test out a new question. You're
Okay.
going to be the first person to answer this question. So it's called start, bench, and cut.
Okay.
You
Basketball.
have 3 dogs.
I do.
So I'm going to ask you this: start, bench, and cut.
You know what? That's super easy. Um,
Sam, Rebel, Leo. What's the order?
all right, here we go. Um, Start is Rebel. He's a wild Chihuahua. He stays ready. He's like a little miniature pincher Chihuahua situation. He stays ready. Sam is going to be benched because she's a pug and she sleeps about 18 hours a day. And Leo, he barks a lot. I love him, but if we had to cut one, he's probably the last one to enter our little tribe. So it'd have to be that baby.
Oh, there you go. You answered that so flawlessly. All right. One more. If you can invite 3 influential figures, dead or alive, to dinner, who would they be?
Ah, okay. This one's so hard for me. It would definitely be James Baldwin. Oh my God. You know what? Cicely Tyson, because
God
um
rest his soul.
oh, I just I had just purchased from Mahogany Books. Um there was gonna be a meet and greet, well, a virtual meet and greet for her new book. And I was so excited to just hear her speak. And after her passing, I've been watching so many different things with her speaking and just sharing so much of her knowledge. And so it would definitely be Cicely Tyson with number 2. And then you know what? I think I would do Jason Reynolds. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I heard him speak in at the Grove in LA one time, and he was just masterful in in some of his reflections and just discussing with him, like, you know, his insight into why he creates, the way that he creates and his process, and just so insightful. So it would be Baldwin, Cicely Tyson, and then Jason Reynolds. And I would love to hear like Jason Reynolds and like Baldwin discuss like how they write in the theories behind it. So that's that.
Wow. And Jason Reynolds is just a phenomenal author.
Yes.
And just shout out to all the Black authors who are writing young adult books and all kinds of literature right now. It's just amazing to see. It's beautiful to see.
And his love and passion for young people, I think, is something that should be, celebrated. And definitely, I'm like, you're an educator, it's his dedication to young people is phenomenal.
Indeed. No disputes there. But Vennieta, we are running out of time, but this has been a phenomenal hour just speaking with you. Finally, me and you virtually.
Oh my God, you're my friend forever. This is so nice. It's been so nice
Yes.
talking to you.
Yes, but thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And hopefully down the road, we can do a part 2 of this.
Oh, can't wait. I'll be waiting for my invite. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that you do.
All right. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
Okay. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. And there you have it, people. We are closing another episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live. And as always, we wish you a good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, people.